Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is honestly a rant on the most disappointing action film of the 2010s, The Expendables 2. And I know some people are like, Rant? That's a fun movie. Like, what are you talking about? That film's good. And to each their own. I know this film has a lot of fans. There are people actually think it's better than the first movie, but I'm not one of them. I'm no longer a fan of this film. This is a movie that really did not hold up for me. When I saw it in the theater, when it came out, I had fun with it. I didn't think it was as good as the first film, but I didn't have a whole lot to complain about, other than a few quibbles here and there. But as the years have gone by, I have tried time and time again to revisit this movie, and each time it's just more and more disappointing. And the last time around that I decided to watch this, the flaws smacked me square in the face. And by the end of it, I thought it was a below average, extremely disappointing action movie. So the film is directed by Simon West, and I think for the most part he did a pretty good job here, given what he had to work with. And he added a stability to the production that was noteworthy. And at the end of the day, I think his direction was an improvement over Stallone's inconsistent, choppy directing from the first film. The action sequences here, when they are presented, are shot well. There's not a lot of shaky cam, there's not a lot of quick cuts. And I also feel the sequences that don't feature action, that are just dialogue or bits of character development, are shot moderately well. And this is one of those movies where the direction, it's not going to blow you away. It's not spectacular, but it's solid. And I think Simon West did a good job here. The screenplay, though, is where this film falters so much, by Stallone and Richard Wank. Despite the running time being nearly identical to the first film, this movie has the pacing of a fucking tank. And that's not a good thing. The first film had some pacing issues here and there, but those pacing issues are nothing compared to this movie, because this film is a boring slog after a legitimately fun opening action sequence. After that action sequence, it's a lot of just nothing. Nothing in terms of the adrenaline, nothing to really get your pulse rate up. It's one of those films where it kind of blows its load early, and then after that point, it barely even rises up to the occasion. Other than some bits of action in the film's climax at the airport, but other than that, I mean, you've got long, extended scenes trying to establish new characters that you don't give a fuck about. Specifically, the female character that's given a lot of screen time, played by Maggie Chan, Yunnan, and Liam Hemsworth's character, the sniper, Billy the Kid. Those two characters, they are given a lot of screen time, and the story gives them a lot of development, and they never pan out. They don't feel like they are welcome here as respected or admirable members of the Expendables. They don't have any chemistry with the rest of the cast. And there's so much given to these characters that it's a detriment to this film's story. They are given more screen time than Dolph Lundgren. You want to see Dolph Lundgren have more to do after he spent half the last film being out of the team, and he's back and he's sober and he's given barely jack shit to do here. Uh, Randy Couture is even more useless than before. You've got Jean-Claude Van Damme as the villain, but he doesn't have as much screen time as you would think because we got to establish these nonsense, completely worthless characters, these new additions to the cast. Stallone and Statham, when they are there, still have the same amount of chemistry and charisma. They still light up the screen, but it feels like it's in some ways the first film's sloppy seconds because they're repeating lines of dialogue and they're repeating things from the first movie. And even though you have Chuck Norris and Bruce Willis and Arnold Schwarzenegger who have a few action sequences, Chuck Norris's bit it feels stale because it's yet another instance of a tired joke at the time, which was the Chuck Norris facts. And you have stuff where Bruce Willis and Schwarzenegger are once again making references. This time around, it's Bruce Willis saying he's going to be the one that's going to be back. Or you'll have Arnold say, I'm back. And you're just like, can we stop using your one-liners from the Terminator or Predator or whatever? Like, for fuck's sake, man. Like, can you say something different? Like when he says my shoe is bigger than this car, that got a bigger laugh out of me because that was something different at least. It wasn't the same fucking tired, stale one-liners. The tagline for this film is back for war, and they don't even really get into that much of a war. Except for the ending. Because you start out with the opening sequence, which is admittedly pretty fun, where they rescue Trench from these villains, and I think in Nepal, and that's a fun sequence. But then it's a lot of just lame bullshit where Billy's talking about how he wants to retire and go live with his girlfriend who's in France. They try to establish this character Billy as some big deal, and it doesn't pan out. It never works. There's this whole bit of character depth with him where he talks about how he had a dog and something about how it had to be put down or they had to kill his dog. And yeah, that sucks, but I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about this character. I don't care about his dog. And the Expendables, they have to set off to somewhere in, I think, what, Albania or some shit, where they have to retrieve some kind of item from a downed airplane. And there's a whole long extended scene where they're trying to get something out of a safe that has an explosive timer on it. And this scene has no energy to it. This scene, it doesn't really get any thrills. It doesn't provide you with any really added excitement or intrigue. It just drags. And then to make matters worse, there's not really a lot of action in that sequence. And that's like 40 minutes into the movie. And then you get to the scene where Van Damme finally shows up as Villain. And then he kills Liam Hemsworth's character. And it's supposed to be this big emotional sequence, and you're supposed to really feel for this character and feel for Stallone and the rest of the crew because one of their own got killed, and I don't really feel anything because I never liked the character to begin with. And that leads to the crew going to some abandoned military base that looks like a American town, and they get ambushed by the Sangs, which I'm like, the Sangs? What, the Sang Brotherhood? What did they rip off the Phantom? You've got the Sangs and they attack the Expendables at the base, and they have a tank, and there's some shootouts, and there's a little bit of action there that's okay, but nothing really that amazing. Because really, it's mostly just there for Chuck Norris's character, the lone wolf, to show up and shoot everybody. And then they decide to go to an airport and go after Van Damme's character and Scott Adkins, who's his right hand man. And the whole reason why this is all going on, the reason why the Expendables even go there, is because they're trying to stop Villain from taking all this plutonium and using it to create bombs and to sell them on the black market and potentially set up World War III. So they go to the hangar or the airport, and Bruce Willis and Schwarzenegger show up too, and they shoot a bunch of people. And you would think that this sequence would have a lot of impact to it because of everyone that's involved and because of the stakes, but it doesn't really have that much. It's moderately exciting. It's moderately enjoyable or fun when it should be extremely enjoyable and extremely fun, like the climax in the first movie. But it never really has that vibe or feel to it. And I think in large parts because this film was shot to be PG-13, and then last minute they threw in blood, CGI blood, and they did some half-ass reshoots to make it R. And that's why it has this vibe of not really as intense action. That's really what's going on here because of the fact that it was shot last minute to be R. And it's pretty obvious. And then you have like the last fight with Stallone and Van Damme, and it's really a sight to see initially to see these two face off, but it's too short. It feels like there's stuff missing. You think that there should be more to this fight. There should be more punches, more kicks, more violence, more energy, more creativity in terms of the choreography. And that's not the case. And you don't even get to see Stallone's character, Barney Ross, cut off Elaine's head. It's all an after effect. So you don't even get the satisfaction of that. So yeah, it's just a really disappointing film in a lot of different ways. It takes too long to get anywhere after the opening action sequence, and then once you get to the big grand finale, it's not as grand as it could be. And that really comes down to the screenplay. And then the acting, it's fine. I mean, Stallone is still energetic enough as Barney Ross, even though he's got a porn star stash for some reason. Jason Statham, he feels like he's uh underused because he doesn't have as many scenes. I mean, his fight with Scott Adkins was one of the other highlights of this movie. One of the best things about the finale, for sure. I would say that was a better fight at the end of the day than the fight between Stallone and Van Damme that was supposedly the one that you waited all this time for. Supposed to be the crowd pleaser and the one that leaves you cheering at the end of the movie, and that's not really what happened. Jet Li, the one scene that he's in is actually well shot and he has some really fun bits of martial arts, but then he fucks off and leaves the movie. Dolph Lundgren just drives a tank, doesn't have much to do. Chuck Norris shows up to collect a paycheck and plays the lone wolf and says a Chuck Norris joke, which was lame, a Chuck Norris fact joke, which is lame, and then has a little bit where he shoots some people at the end. Terry Crews feels like he's even less necessary than before alongside Randy Couture, because even he's no longer the guy with the gun because now Schwarzenegger's character has it. But it seemed like the gun itself was sanitized. There's this weird thing that happened with that gun throughout this franchise where the gun started to become less and less powerful and started to have all the power and just punch of Hawaiian Punch. And then, yeah, Van Damme, he's having fun. He does a good job as the villain, but he's barely in the movie, doesn't have that much screen time, and has a pretty lame and forgettable fight with Stallone at the end of the movie. Yunnan, completely worthless. She can't act either. It was an atrocious performance for an atrocious character that I didn't give a fuck about. Tried to establish some kind of love interest with her that's trying to be like Kobao and Rambo 2 when it comes to a love interest with her and Stallone, and it never goes anywhere. And then Liam Hemsworth, lame Hemsworth, the lamer Hemsworth brother who has nowhere near the same amount of charisma and talent as his brother. Bruce Willis once again just shuffling around like a fucking zombie here. Schwarzenegger looking old and haggard. Scott Adkins, good casting choice. He does a good job. Doesn't really have a lot to do in the few scenes that he's in, but he does enough to leave at least some bit of an impact. The music by Brian Tyler is just recycled bits from his score from the first film. It's nothing really that special. The cinematography by Shelley Johnson, mediocre. So is the editing. So, for a film that's marketed as being like this awesome, badass, big, bad action movie, there's like 3 action scenes total. I guess if you combine them all together, maybe 4. And each one is more disappointing than the last. Because the best action scene is arguably the one that opens the film. Because the bits in the finale are really nothing that spectacular to me. They are lesser versions of what you saw at the end of the first film. And then you got other stuff too, like really pathetic, embarrassing attempts at humor where they're trying to be meta and clever, but it's not working, or they're just trying to be random. Where you have Dolph Lundgren's character talking about whale ass. And it just leads to a film that's just nowhere near as fun, nowhere near as exciting, and nowhere near as enjoyable as the first movie. So, yeah, I don't really know what else to say about Expendables 2. I pretty much said it all. It's a massive disappointment. It's easily the most disappointing film in the franchise because Expendables 3 at this point I had no hope for due to its PG-13 rating and its stupid idiotic idea to put the Expendables on the side and try to retire them in favor of a new generation for a new generation of audience members that don't give a fuck about old school action. But I'll save the rest of that for the Expendables 3 rant redux. But with Expendables 2, back for war, and it's more like just back for a paycheck, back for lunch. It's just nothing really that memorable or consistently enjoyable or exciting. It takes way too long to get to the point where guns are blazing and knives are being thrown and punches are being thrown, and it's just one of those movies where, considering everyone that's involved, considering the fact that the first film started things off so well, it's just such a lukewarm, lame sequel. Yes, I've seen worse because I do have some fun with some bits of action here and there. It's nice to see Van Damme as a bad guy, and you can tell that he's having the time of his life playing the villain. And some of the performances aren't that bad, and it does have at times some of the same fun and the same charm that the original, that the first film had. But for the most part, though, it's just going through the motions. And that's not good enough. So the first film was dependable, and to me, the Expendables 2 was undependable. Undependable when it comes to the action, in terms of the adrenaline or the rush, and undependable when it comes to the story. Even though apparently people say it has a better script, I think it's a worse script because we have characters that are introduced into the fray that take away screen time from characters we would like to see more of, and a first half that's just boring after you get past the opening action sequence, and a finale that's tepid and feels watered down. So yeah, I got nothing else. Except thanks for watching my rant on Expendables 2. And as always, I'll see you later. See ya.